Welcome to the Disruptance Podcast. The Disruptance Podcast is the show that disrupts the way entrepreneurs think to make them more profitable and impactful. Rethink tired and outdated business norms to welcome innovation and unlock your unlimited possibilities. Here are your hosts, Eric Forney and Greg Fowler.
All right, Eric, so we got a good one today, my friend, for Season 2, Episode 5, and I'm really excited just to kind of get your perspective and thought process kind of prior to last episode, kind of rolling into this one, talking about failure and success. And I guess the main topic is why failing is a massive part of success. I know you've got so much perspective into that. Anybody who's hit the highest of levels has failed way more than they've succeeded. That's kind of a part. But I just want to dive into a couple things, kind of set the stage and the tone, and then see where your head's at with that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's interesting. I think the word failure is probably overused, especially in business. You know, when you think about like failing a grade, there's actually a real world consequence, and there are setbacks. And those setbacks take an entire year to recover from, right? Like if you couldn't read as a second grader, we won't out your secret, Greg, but if you couldn't read as a second grader, they might have held you back another year. You failed to pass on to third grade. I think that one of the challenges becomes that we overuse the word failure. And so it's hard to distinguish between catastrophic, trajectory defining moments where we fail to actually achieve a goal, and then where we fail and go out of business. Mm-hmm. And so I think it when we put it in the context of being an entrepreneur, we first have to level with the level set with what is failure. Is failure just trying a new initiative and that initiative doesn't get us the results that we want? Or is failure running out of money, getting indicted by the IRS, and being Enron, right? There's these massive spectrums in between. And so, you know, I'm somebody who would tell you that I don't think I've encountered a lot of failure. And I would say that because I haven't had those going out of business moments where they're life defining and they're life altering moments. And so when people say you just have to fail faster or fail forward or fail more, I really struggle with that. I think that you should be iterating. You should be reflecting on what you've done. Business should be somewhat of a scientific method, right? It's like that you have a hypothesis about a new initiative, a business model, a sales strategy, a pricing strategy, and then you take action against your hypothesis. You then reflect on the results. Based on the reflection and your theory, then you decide whether to iterate on your hypothesis, so that you continue to repeat that scientific method of approaching businesses. But that doesn't mean you failed just because your theory was wrong.
But I like how you're describing that, Eric. And to anybody who's feeling to themselves, well, hey, I'm not a superhero or a unicorn like Eric, and I failed a ton sort of scenario. I think that process still holds true, whether it's you're on one side or the other. It is that scientific mentality to kind of base it off of how you're having that success, getting the feedback, and then going back to it. I think a mindset structure is important too, because as an entrepreneur and as you're going through life, it's not all sunshine and roses. So to be able to get back on the horse, as they say, if there is failure throughout that process, I think is crucial. This point, and again, not coining this information as my own or on behalf of Disruptance, but this is from an Inc.com article. I think it's pretty interesting to kind of go through, and essentially they stipulated the main fears, Eric, and it was really based off of the fear of failure as one of the top, if not the top, instances that people stop from hitting their goals, from hitting their dreams. Public speaking is a part of it. Spiders is another one. And then obviously the paranormal, if you are into that. There's a lot of fear behind all that stuff. But ultimately, this comparison, and you and I sort of glazed over this towards the end of last episode, there's a lot of famous and wildly successful professionals that have failed and have learned from those experiences scientifically, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So this article is titled 11 Famous Failures That'll Inspire You to Succeed. So I'm just going to glaze over this super quick as far as the individuals, but I'd love to get your take on some of this or anything that stands out to you, Eric, from that standpoint. So they referenced Michael Jordan and essentially cut out from his high school basketball team. They utilized Walt Disney, and he was fired from a newspaper company early on. And they said that he lacked imagination. Steven Spielberg, which is crazy, right? You think lack of imagination. How dare you? Steven Spielberg, he got rejected from film school 3 separate times. John Grisham, the author, he was rejected 20 times with his first book, A Time to Kill. Albert Einstein was labeled as mentally slow, which is pretty crazy to me. They have also Henry Ford. First 2 automobile companies failed. Oprah Winfrey is among this into, early job as a television anchor. She was fired. Jerry Seinfeld, the stand-up. I mean, there's so many different things. You had referenced Dyson, which I think is personal. Into last one, they have listed, he suffered 5,126 failures before the first working Dyson Vacuum. Elvis Presley's in there. The Colonel Sanders himself from KFC. The list goes on and on and on. So, Eric, where's your head at when you just hear that list of professionals that have, really hit the pinnacles of their craft and career, and they've been rejected and failed and pushed aside? What's kind of your thought process or takeaways for the audience with any of that mentality?
I sound like an old World War II curmudgeon when I hear this, and I just go, okay, that's rejection. And rejection is not failure, right?
Oof.
That you look at the difference between failure and rejection have massively different consequences. You had to get rejected by anyone you were interested in order to successfully be in the awesome marriage that you're in right now.
Well said.
And so those are not failures. Those are just plans that didn't materialize, right? Or they're rejections, they're roadblocks. To me, a failure in business again is causing something that makes you go out of business, that harms the people that you made commitment to around you. You look at like Steve Jobs, for instance. You could make an argument that Steve Jobs being fired from the company he founded after releasing, the first round of Apple products and before coming back to save the company, you could argue that he failed by being ousted from the company that he started. There are very few failure stories like that in business, though. Now, if you look at Google, they fail to materialize revenue on a ton of products. Like Google Glass, for instance, you could chalk that up potentially as a failure. However, Google Glass is likely going to be a long-term sustainable product in the future based on the innovation and technology that came just by doing the work, releasing the product, even though there was no mass market appeal. The good news is it didn't bankrupt Google, right? It didn't put them out of business just because one product was a failure. And so I just like to contextualize this because it's too easy to, we've almost as a society like drifted to therapy culture where we've gotten like so soft that, and listen, I'm a huge advocate of therapy. It's been one of the best things I've did as an adult. And so I am all about that life. However, at a certain point it stops. And by that, I mean, at a certain point, we stop making everything traumatic that doesn't go our way. Right, as we stop making rejection or initiatives that don't get off the ground anything more than what they are, which is just something that didn't work. It's a gamble that you tried that you didn't win. It's a hand at the poker table you played that you paid back to the house. Nothing more, nothing less. I always think of it as, what's the alternative? As in, like, okay, some initiative doesn't work out. We lose money. We don't get a sale. What's the alternative? What am I going to do tomorrow? Not wake up? Not go back to work? Those aren't options. And so, if I don't plan to quit, then I don't plan to fail. It's just a matter of whether I've tried enough combinations enough times in order to get the result that I want. But there isn't another option. Wake it up tomorrow, going back to work.
But Eric, the way that you articulated it is kind of a wake up call for anybody who's looking for the excuses, or, saying, hey, I'm not them, or this isn't my scenario, or we all kind of put these barriers or thought process. I think the mindset has a lot to do with that. And I know that's thrown around quite a bit, but ultimately what really stood out to me is looking at it from an evaluated and scientific basis as to how to really find that success. And this is from Thomas Edison. I've not failed 10,000 times. I've successfully found 10,000 ways that it will not work. So it's again, I don't know if the failure success or if it's rejection versus failure. I think that's something that we all need to really understand what scenario it is. But despite that fact, everybody that we mentioned and more, the constant nature is what you're mentioning. They're not giving up. They're always moving forward into a positive, to taking learning experiences, reevaluate kind of their position, analyzing and improving, looking at the strategy and then implementing it again, getting feedback and doing it again and again and again. What are your thoughts on that, Eric? I mean, because despite the fact that you've had so much meticulous growth in nature, is there any reflection that you can give to anybody just kind of past story or experience where you felt the rejection and or the learning experience that you could kind of shed light that you've kind of gained as a resource for the audience, from your perspective?
Yeah, a couple things come to mind. I mean, I felt like a failure before.
Okay.
I felt like a failure even when the reality was not the case. And there are times that you can have the wrong environment, the wrong people, the wrong opportunity, that you're the wrong vision, that you're attempting to go drive for an outcome, and either the people around you can tell you you're a failure, or the loudest fans in the cheapest seats can tell you what a POS you are. There's a lot of different ways that you can feel like a failure, but most of the time it's rarely accurate. Wow. Unless the failure was just not waking up and putting in the work on a daily basis, and just attempting to be just a tiny little bit better today than yesterday. And so there were times I felt like a failure. And I kind of go back to this, and I remind people internally within the company all the time, which is never make long-term decisions with short-term thinking. Never make long-term decisions with short-term thinking, because the emotions of short-term thinking will oftentimes cause us to do long-term damage to something that we want over the course of time, that may seem like it's unattainable today. And I just use the example of when I partnered with Livian, it was a really easy decision. And it was such an easy decision for me because it was a long-term decision. And I had enough long-range thinking to know that it was a simple, easy yes, because the framework goes like this. When I'm 80 years old, will I be glad that I did, or will I regret that I didn't? And given the opportunity to, learn from two of the best leaders in the industry, Gary Keller, who's for 2 decades in a row been the most influential leader in real estate. There are 2,000 or so billionaires in the country. If you have the opportunity to learn from one on a regular basis, mentor, and get a, behind the scenes look, and you say no, they should question you for your sanity, right? You should be admitted as to whether you're capable of making good decisions. And so, when running a startup is difficult, Greg, like it is incredibly difficult. I think Elon Musk always says, he likens it to chewing glass. Right. He says that, of all the suffering in life, 2/3 of his suffering is purely by attempting to be an entrepreneur at Tesla, because it's difficult, especially when you're trying to do something like what Elon's doing. But a startup is hard. And so there are days in which it would be easy to quit. And I go back to long range thinking short-term decision, long range decision to quit.
Yep.
Short-term thinking is in the moment frustration, in the moment it's whatever that heightened emotion is. And so it becomes easy, I think, to then realize that when you understand where you're going and life is long, then you make decisions with that framework. Now, I understand that that's a shitty bumper sticker to say life is long, make rational choices. No one's going to put that on a bumper, on like an airbrush t-shirt in Gatlinburg. I get it. However, it's true. It doesn't mean that it doesn't go by quickly. It doesn't mean that there's a second chance, but you still have to make long-term decision making, and you don't do it with short frame thought process.
Yeah, well said into that. And I think that a lot of individuals can base that framework off of the easier said than done mentality, but it's work, it's effort, it's conscious thought process to say, this is what I want to build into my life and into my world, personally, professionally, and don't make excuses. Just look for the solution that are going to get it.
Can I challenge you a little bit? I'm not challenging you. I'm challenging the listener who says that it's difficult. And I only say that because I'm like, it's actually not difficult. And I mean that because, Craig, you've been with your wife for, almost 2 decades. And I would imagine that you wake up and you go, my job today is to be a better husband today than I was yesterday. Certainly my job today is to be a better husband than I was 2 decades ago. Mm-hmm. And so is it hard to wake up with that way of thinking?
To me personally, and I love that challenge for everybody, Eric, I don't think so.
Okay.
There's people that look at it and they use that as an excuse for difficulty in nature. Like, I'm not wired that way, or I don't have that spherical influence around me. I mean, these are all, to me, excuses. And it's not to downplay anybody's physical geographic situation or what cards that they were dealt into life. But look, we all have problems. We all have hardships. Some are more noticeable and larger in the life scheme than others. But at the end of the day, we all have to forge the life that we're looking to build. So I would firmly agree with you. It's not difficult. I mean, to get up every day and whether it's relationship or not, to have a positive thought to say, hey, today's a new day. Super excited about it. Opportunities in abundance versus another day. I got to roll out. I got to do this now. Thinking about whether you're getting out of bed, going to the gym, picking up the phone, doing the activities that are necessary. I mean, all of those you can either let it plague you or propel you. I don't know, Eric. I think that's a message that everyone needs to hear loud and clear. That's a conscious decision. But just make sure that that's something that's in alignment with what you want to do with your life, because you only go around once.
Well, and I just always go back to this. Is like, if someone would argue and say that that's not who they are, right? If someone goes, well, I just don't wake up and think that way, then my counter to that would say is, so you think the other way, which is, I'm going to wake up today to be worse off today than I was yesterday. Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds like no way to live. And that's living the Benjamin Button life doesn't seem like a great career path or a great way to get anything that you want out of the time that you're here. And so, to even think for a second that we wouldn't all approach life from the framework of having today be a little bit better than we were yesterday, last week, last month, last year. You never go undefeated. It doesn't mean that I wake up and am a better husband every day. It's just impossible, I think, to be undefeated in life like that. But I don't keep score, and I don't track the number of days that I don't accomplish the things that I want to do, which is get incrementally better every single day. I just know that if I set out with the intention to be better today, every day, if I set out to be better today than I was the previous days, I'm going to win more than I lose. I may go on a losing streak. I may not win 100% of them or 75% of them, but damn it, over the long enough period of time, I'm going to win.
And Eric, that brings up a really solid point for everybody out there, because, the topic of conversation is failure and or rejection, equates to the long-term for success, and that people go through it in different phases and stages. I think that that is important to note. But then to that next question into my mind, and I know you're very versed on this because you practice what you preach. It's small habits and big output. I guess kind of on that regular framework as to the actions that we take every day end up adding up to those results. So I think that this is
Yep.
also one of those things that people throw around quite a bit in nature is I'm too busy to fail. I'm too busy to not have success in my life because they're always putting in the work. So what comes to mind when somebody would ask you, "Hey, Eric, like what are the small habits? What would you do, really trying to move the needle forward as an entrepreneur, as a top tier real estate professional, as a father, a husband, whatever comes to mind? What are you thinking with small habits, big output?"
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like what comes to mind is, and I'm gonna mess this up here, but I always think like at the end of the day, the like one of the things about being human is that we often gravitate towards complexity, and especially in today's world where everything you could ever want is on demand at your fingertips, right? And we especially gravitate towards complexity. And yet there are a few principles that are timeless and are multiplying because they have exponential output on quality of life. The challenge is they're so unsexy that they get diminished or that they get forsaken because of their simplicity and their boringness. And yet I just, for the ability to memorize them, because I'm not so bright here, I'm just a dumb kid from Indiana. I've kind of distilled them down into 6 S's. And those multiplying pillars are sunshine, sweat, sleep, salad, someone to love, and sex. And so if you think about how do you get as many of those 6 categories as possible, as frequent and consistent as possible, they have an exponential impact on quality of life and health. And so, I don't actually mean salads.
I was going to say, I'm not getting my salads in, Eric. I'm getting all the rest of that in there, but I was inquiring about the salads, my friend. But go ahead.
So I don't need a salad either. Let's be honest. So what I mean by that though is that the way, again, the way my simple brain works is it goes, okay, I have to actually have a plan and a priority of eating, and and so, like, funny enough, like I just so happen to have like my meals in my bag that I take into the office that I, one, don't have to make a choice, and 2, I can prioritize the like pillar of what I eat. And I can do that knowing that calorically, macronutrient wise, and convenience, I've checked the box on that.
And right? Eric, not to deviate to this, but for anybody who's just strictly listening to this, if you're watching it, what service do you use? This is not a plug. This is completely This is not sponsored. But what do you use?
Yeah, so I order mine from Factor. I think it's Factor 75. And we've used any and all different meal services. It seems like that's a kick I kind of got onto as I had more success in sales, was that I really tried to shave off time of things that I didn't like, that weren't giving me exponential benefit. And one of them was cooking and grocery shopping and all that. So as a family, we try to do almost all prepared, pre-cooked meals. Lauren typically orders like, oh gosh, I'll think of it. She gets her meals from a different company.
Well, there's Blue Apron, there's Hello Fresh. There's so many of the mainstream ones, but there's.
But so the thing with those is it's roughly the same amount of money, but neither one of us want to cook.
Got it.
And so the reason why we've done pre-cooked meals is because neither one of us actually have any interest in going through the work of cooking them, because now I've got to do dishes and I've got to take the time to cook. Yep. Like Hudson said today, hey, tonight's going to be play night. Cool. I don't even know what, oh no, game night. And I have no idea what that means. We'll find out tonight. However, what I don't want to do is waste an hour cooking and doing dishes. If I could spend an hour playing game night, whatever that is, seems like a way better investment. And the cost is like minimal difference. You know, I think Lauren's meals are like $7. And the factor meals they keep jacking the price on them. So if they weren't so convenient, I probably wouldn't stay with them. But the fact that they deliver to your door and I'll eat almost every single one for the most part, they're all edible to me, and I'll eat them all, and they deliver them to the door. Makes it to where it's a good investment.
And we got to have, that's a great episode, obviously leveraging time and setting up and structure for a life ecosystem or balance. I didn't mean to digress. I was just curious. I want to hit us back to the 6 S's before we go too deep down the rabbit hole.
I mean, it's an interesting thing though, is that, like, you know, it kind of goes to that failure point, is that what we were just talking about is, like, you hear all of these, like advice and all these suggestions and all the ways they tell you to do real estate sales, way to be an entrepreneur, like all these hacks. And leverage is one of them. And then, you know, to fail forward, but you never get the stair step understanding of, like, how you start with leverage, or how you start by shaving off time, or how you start by failing. You only ever see, like, what it looks like in the end. You very rarely see what it's like in the beginning or in the incremental growth stages. And so I just would want to make sure that entrepreneurs understand that it's not wake up and have tons of time efficiencies and have tons of leverage. It's an evolution process. It's an iteration process. And so when you think about, then how do you increase the multiplication of those tiny habits in order to get exponential output? Well, I don't know. I can't advise you on how to have more sex. That's a different podcast. You probably don't want to take romance advice from me either on someone to love. But you know, for me on the sleep side, I try to track that with either watch or ring. And then sunshine. You know, this is my hot take. I love me some conspiracy theories. I just don't talk about them because people get too triggered for me to take time to waste time about. But sun to me is one of them. And you know, as a species, we've lived a pretty long time with a relationship with the sun. And to have just so recently have said, you know, what we shouldn't do is have any relationship with the sun. There's a lot of health benefits from the sun. And so
100%.
I mean, there's some interesting research that just looks at, like, how many days it takes to be on vacation, or how many days after you move from Boston to Miami for your mood to go up. It's undeniable, the correlation between the two, at least. So
Sure.
Just figuring out a way to build those habits into your routine, and then you can start to worry about the smaller, the micro activities that make a difference, like, you know, skills and resources and tools and everything else. But if you don't nail the larger pillars of multiplying success, there's no reason to try to go out and crush the little micro activities that matter.
It's building the house on sand mentality. You really talked about the bedrock pillars, the foundation of success needs to be built. And that way, you know, sky's the limit and then some, what you build on top. And with proper engineering and understanding, and then the science behind it. Everything that you said, Eric, made perfect sense. I love the fact that, you know, you're kind of looking at it from the perspective of the end user. You know, whoever's listening to this and needs to hear the things that you're saying is crucially important. And this doesn't happen overnight. And just because you're tuning into Disruptance right now doesn't mean that you're just going to exponentially grow and change. But you made a decision to be here, to listen to Eric and myself and what we're bringing, you know, to the table, to life, and to entrepreneurialism and business. You know, I know that I appreciate everybody taking the time to do that too. And Eric, anything you want to close with, or any last thoughts or parting words before we wrap this episode up?
No, I would say I just want to reinstill that component of understanding the distinction between feeling like a failure, between rejection, roadblocks, things that don't pan out the way you want them to be, and then actually failing. Failure is oftentimes something that has no recourse. There's no way to put it back together, right? The Roman Empire, it failed. And we're not putting it back together no matter how many toga parties you go to, Greg. And so the failure is determined by what's fundamentally broken and irreparable. Very few entrepreneurs get there unless they are willing to quit, or unless they're attempting to solve a problem that the consumer just doesn't want to have solved.
Oh, love it. Well said, Eric. Again, always a pleasure. Honor my friend. Everybody, thanks for your time and attention. As always, we'll catch you on the next episode of Disruptance. Take care.